Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. You are watching your operational briefing for April 14th, 2026. And today, the spring offensive everyone was waiting for became real. Russian forces are moving on a 50-kilometer front in Sumy Oblast. The Great Sumy Forest has been entered. Foliage is up. The window that analysts had been watching since early April has opened. And it opened fast. On the Kharkiv direction, strikes against the Pecheniz Dam signal something larger is being prepared. On the Zaporizhzhia direction, up to 50 pieces of equipment entered Huliapol the moment the Easter ceasefire ended. In Berlin, Zelensky and Merz signed agreements that tell you everything you need to know about the timeline. This war is being planned through 2027. 90 billion euros, new brigades, mobilization pressure on Ukrainians across Europe. The foundation for next year's campaign is being laid today. And in the Middle East, a defense agreement with Indonesia just gave the United States a position at the Singapore Strait, completing a picture in which four major powers now each hold a key to the Indian Ocean. A lot to get through. Let us get into it. April 14th, 2026 will enter the chronicle of the conflict as the day the Russian spring offensive on the Sumy direction ceased to be a forecast and became a documented fact. It is symbolic that it coincided not with the astronomical arrival of spring, but with the appearance of foliage. The precise moment analysts had been watching since the start of April as the critical trigger for activating forest corridors. In the night of April 14th, the Russian side deployed at least 133 drones based on data available as of 8 a.m., but strikes did not stop during daylight hours. By the time this briefing was compiled, both drones and, in all likelihood, missiles were continuing to enter Ukrainian territory. The final daily figure will be substantially higher than initially published. The Russian side concentrated maximum effort on two vectors, the northern and southern. The northern, Chernihiv and Sumy oblasts, received the heaviest fire attention. Footage from Chernihiv showed dense black smoke rising over the city after the strike. One published episode warrants particular attention. A Russian drone en route to an electrical substation north of the city detected a Ukrainian mobile air defense group during its flight and corrected course, striking it. This episode documents a qualitatively new tactical capability. The Russian side is managing drones that have already penetrated deep into Ukrainian territory in real time, retargeting them against newly discovered objectives. The Ukrainian tactic of mobile air defense groups, a serious counter to mass UAV application, is gradually losing its effectiveness in the face of this capability. In Shostka, strikes were recorded against facilities of presumably military character. The character of the explosion and the volume of smoke indicate a fuel storage facility was hit. On the southern direction, an atypical pattern was recorded in the Kryvyi area. Strikes were conducted during daylight hours in bright conditions, allowing residents to capture a large volume of footage. The logic of these strikes is readable from precedent. Kryvyi serves as a key node in the air defense system of Ukraine's southern sector. As a rule, its suppression precedes a large-scale strike deeper into the country. Pro-Ukrainian monitoring resources recorded that immediately after the work against Kryvyi air defenses, the first drone swarms began entering Mykolaiv and Dnipropetrovsk oblasts. The pattern, first wave suppresses air defense, second wave passes through the gap created, is reproducing here with characteristic precision. In Dnipropetrovsk, footage was also published showing a large smoke column. The full picture of strikes on the southern direction had not yet taken shape at the time of this briefing. Regarding the overall logic of strikes from April 1st through April 14th against northern Ukraine, practically every 10 to 20 kilometers of Chernihiv and Sumy oblasts were subjected to strikes over 2 weeks. Now, in light of the offensive that has begun, this campaign acquires a new dimension. It was not simply preemptive suppression of Ukrainian strikes, it was a targeted degradation of rear area support, fuel stocks, ammunition depots, administrative functioning, in preparation for a ground offensive. Sumy direction, broad front, the offensive begins. The main event of April 14th is unfolding precisely here. Pro-Ukrainian mapping resources, which is itself a strong signal, published large-scale corrections on the Sumy sector, reflecting Russian unit advances across a broad front. The width of the active offensive is assessed at approximately 50 kilometers, from Myropilya to Ryazna. The documented events on this direction over the past 24 hours. Russian units have advanced to the immediate approaches of the hamlet of Besetske. The approaches to Veliki Prikil and Petrivshchina have been reached. Entry into Prokhody has been recorded. A flanking envelopment of Turia has been executed. An advance to the western outskirts of Stepok. Flanking envelopment of Novodnitrivka. An advance to the approaches of Tarutine. Continued offensive movement toward Ryazan. All of these advances are accompanied by aviation strikes against both forward and rear positions of Ukrainian forces on this sector. The operational meaning of this movement must be assessed in proper context. Russian units are advancing from the east towards Sumy along the borderline. Simultaneously, entry into the Great Sumy Forest is underway, a massif stretching from the state border practically to the city itself. It is through this forest corridor, shielded from FPV observation by foliage, that the main strike toward the oblast capital will apparently develop. The April greenery closes the forest from above, denying the Ukrainian side the ability to track movement inside the massif from the air. This moment was anticipated. It has arrived. A fundamentally important analytical question that has no unambiguous answer yet. Is this advance along the border east of Sumy the primary strike direction, or is it serving as a diversionary maneuver to pin reserves before a concentrated breakthrough elsewhere? Both versions merit attention. The argument for a primary direction, the systematic strikes against northern Ukraine since April 1st deliberately prepared precisely this bridgehead. The argument for diversion, a broad front works well as an instrument for stretching the adversary's forces before a concentrated breakthrough. From the perspective of the strategic logic of Russian actions, another dimension should not be forgotten. It is precisely from northeastern Ukraine that the most damaging strikes against Russian territory have been conducted for months. The advance into Sumy Oblast also serves a defensive function, establishing a buffer zone that reduces the threat to strategic facilities on the Russian side. Kharkiv direction, strikes against the Pechenez Dam. On the Kharkiv direction, April 14th recorded an event potentially altering the operational picture of the entire northeastern sector. An aviation strike was conducted against the dam of the Pechenez Reservoir. Published footage shows the approach of the aerial bomb, which by all indications missed its target. However, the vector of intent is clear. Strikes will continue until the result is achieved. The operational significance of this facility is defined by its hydrological consequences. If the dam is destroyed, the waters of the Pechenez Reservoir will move southward, causing flooding across a significant zone. This would temporarily paralyze Ukrainian logistics toward Bily Kolodez and Veliki Burluk, key supply links for groupings on the northeastern flank of Kharkiv Oblast. There are grounds to believe this strike is connected to preparation for a broader offensive on the Kharkiv direction. According to available assessments, the objective of this offensive is not a direct advance on Kharkiv city itself, but the reaching of natural barriers, the Oskil and Siversky Donetsk rivers. These rivers form a strategically convenient defensive line. Reaching them would allow a significant shortening and straightening of the front line on this sector, freeing forces for other directions. The terminal horizon for this maneuver appears to be the end of 2026, ahead of potential Ukrainian counteroffensive actions in 2027. Kostiantynivka direction. On the Kostiantynivka direction, corrections have been recorded in the southern part of the city. The previous line configuration reflected positions as of April 13th. Today's data, primarily from Ukrainian sources, confirm Russian force advances in the southern sector. Fighting in the central and industrial parts of the city continues. Full Russian control over the Megatex industrial zone is approaching, though the final resolution has not yet occurred. The more intense battles for the main residential parts of the city, including the multi-story districts, lie ahead. Sloviansk direction. On the Sloviansk direction, no cartographic changes over the past 24 hours. Russian units continue movement toward Oleksandrivka and the Great Forest, but the tempo on this sector remains modest. Lyman, no new confirmed changes, pressure continues. Zaporizhzhia direction. Final preparation for the strike. On the Zaporizhzhia direction, the situation on April 14th acquired new dynamics connected with the conclusion of the Easter ceasefire. Pro-Ukrainian sources recorded the entry of up to 50 pieces of equipment into Mariupol on the eve of the ceasefire's end. This is an unambiguous signal. The East grouping is preparing for decisive action. The only question is where the main strike will be directed, toward Orikhiv, Verkhnya Tersa, or Mariupolsk directly. The East grouping is intensifying pressure across the entire line. Verkhnya Tersa, Voskresenivka, Rozdvianka, all of these points are under mounting pressure. The objective declared by Russian sources, wedging between Ukrainian defensive lines across the full width of the direction. These are not localized tactical strikes. This is preparation for the systematic destruction of the outer defensive ring of Orikhiv. The political dimension, Berlin and the 2027 strategy. On April 14th, Ukrainian President Zelensky arrived in Berlin on an official visit for talks with German Chancellor Merz. On the agenda, mobilization questions, weapons production, and the deployment of a €90 billion credit package whose final formalization is expected after the conclusion of Hungarian parliamentary elections. Analysis of the totality of the Berlin agreements allows a conclusion that is important to state clearly. Everything happening in Berlin today, strategic partnerships, defense agreements, financial mechanisms, mobilization arrangements, represents the laying of the foundation for Ukraine's military campaign of 2027. The €90 billion are not operational funding for current fighting. They are resources for forming new brigades, completing existing ones, producing missiles, air defense systems, and accumulating munitions. The planning horizon is spring 2027. Merz's statement about restricting the stay of Ukrainians of military age on German territory and likely across the entire Schengen zone deserves separate attention. In the context of Ukraine's mobilization crisis, the meaning of this statement is clear: the gradual forced return of military-age men to the country. In substance, an instrument for replenishing Ukrainian armed forces with the resources they critically lack at present. For Russia, this context establishes a clear time reference. Before the potential Ukrainian counteroffensive of 2027, approximately until the end of 2026, remains for maximum strategic strengthening of positions, reaching favorable defensive lines, and degrading Ukrainian military potential to a level at which the counteroffensive either does not materialize or repeats the fate of the 2023 campaign near Orikhiv. The Middle East, the battle for the Straits. On the Middle Eastern theater, April 14's main subject remains the Strait of Hormuz. American carrier strike groups are closing on the Iranian coastline and are already within range of Iranian ballistic missiles. However, Iran has not yet struck. Both sides are playing a game of psychological attrition. Who will crack first under the pressure of force concentration? The situation in the strait today acquired a characteristic ambivalence. Some tankers, primarily Chinese, transited without interruption. Some vessels that had already entered the strait turned back at the last moment. The positions of both sides remain unchanged. The United States is opposed to any payments to Iran for transit, while Iran admits no one without payment and without its own authorization. The key strategic event of the day. The United States signed a defense agreement with Indonesia. The geographic significance of this step is difficult to overstate. Indonesia is situated directly at the Singapore Strait, the second most important maritime corridor into the Indian Ocean. American military presence here means effective control over this route. If all the control points for access to the Indian Ocean are mapped simultaneously, the picture proves remarkably symmetrical. The Strait of Hormuz, under Iranian control. The Bab el-Mandeb Strait, near Yemen, under the control of the Houthis, Iranian allies. The Mozambique Channel between Africa and Madagascar. Russia is actively developing infrastructure following the signing of agreements with the new Madagascar leadership after a recent military coup. The Singapore Strait, the United States, following the agreement with Indonesia. 4 key maritime arteries, 4 players. Whoever controls even 2 of them de facto controls global oil prices and the resource balance for any state dependent on maritime imports. What we are observing is not simply military events. We are observing the beginning of the formation of a new architecture of global resource control. On the southern Lebanese direction, Israeli defense forces continue their buffer zone creation operation. By April 14th, the complete encirclement of the settlements of Bint Jubail and Ramesh in southern Lebanon has been recorded. 2 encirclements have been formed. Movement toward the Litani River continues, but a significant distance to the river itself remains. Consolidated assessment. April 14th is one of the most strategically event-dense days since the start of the April campaign. On the Ukrainian theater, the primary point of attention is the Sumy direction, where the Russian spring offensive has transitioned from the infiltration phase to broad front movement. A 50-kilometer band of active pressure from Myropilya to Ryazna, aviation accompaniment of ground operations, entry into the forest massif, all the indicators of a serious operational undertaking, not tactical probing. The Kharkiv direction received additional momentum in the form of strikes against the Pecheniz Dam, an event whose consequences may significantly alter the logistics picture of the northeastern flank in the coming days. On the Zaporizhzhia direction, the conclusion of the Easter ceasefire with the immediate concentration of equipment in Huliapol leaves minimal room for optimism regarding the fate of the outer ring of Kharkiv. The Berlin agreements established the strategic horizon of 2027, which in itself represents an acknowledgement. The war will not end in 2026. In the Middle East, a global architecture of maritime corridor control is taking shape, with participants that now include not only regional players, but the world's leading powers. Briefing compiled as of the evening of April 14, 2026.